CEO. Now, I've made this point, David, that John Bennett, we all want to hear from him every now and then, not all the time, obviously. You don't want to hear from your chairman all the time. But every single time he comes out, when he talks about playing squad and transfers and the matters at the club, he just makes things worse for himself in the eyes of the supporters. See, when he was asked about the CEO and if you're close to it, and I get, right, it's Rangers TV's told what to ask him, but of course they are. It's Rangers TV, right?
Yeah.
If you're asked about a CEO and he goes, well, we're nearly there, maybe a couple of weeks, don't say a couple of weeks if it's not going to be a couple of weeks.
That's a big topic for a Wednesday night, isn't it? That's a strange world that we live in, and you can sometimes be locked into the narrative of the way things are going. And I think that Rangers, John Bennett and the Rangers board are locked into the narrative now of it's bad decision built on top of a bad decision, which increases the pressure, which reduces the likelihood of the next decision being a good decision. And the perception among the fans is that they can't get anything right. Well, the perception of that has grown because they haven't got much right that we can see visibly, right? So it's not an unfair perception, it's an accurate perception because we've had 3 years minimum of bad decisions. And now we're having to unpick these bad decisions. Now, I've mentioned this before on Heart and Hand.
By the way, link for Heart and Hand is in the description.
If it was me, right, I would be looking at this, trying to take a step back, and it's difficult, and it's probably more difficult for these guys because the amount of money that they put in, and they'll have egos. You don't get to be successful if you don't have an ego, and they're, I'm sure do. But I would be trying to take a step back and saying, do you know what, am I any good at this? Right, over and above that, I've put the money in. Am I any good at this? And I would look at the state Rangers are in and say, I'm not. Now, that's not to say that they're not good at running the finances. That's not to say that the whole thing about when people say, they need to go. Well, it's unlikely that they're going to go, right? I don't think, by the way, that they definitely need to go, but they do need to hand over the responsibility of running the club on a day-to-day basis to a professional who can do it.
Yeah, certainly the footballing side.
Yeah, it's very similar to when David Holmes was given that at Rangers in the 80s. Now, you're too young to remember this, but I'm sure a lot of the listeners do. David Holmes came in with a vision and a plan, and he was allowed to put it into place. Now, as I say, that they're putting money in, money that's been vital to Rangers, and that's great. But on the football side of the business, not the finance or anything, the football side of the business, we have been failing for a number of years. And that has come about partly because of decisions that they've taken. So I would be, if it was me, going, I'm good at this, but I'm no good at that. So what I'll do is I'll hire somebody who's good at that, and I'll put them in place. The CEO appointment is vital, is absolutely vital. Let's not kid ourselves here. It needs to be somebody who has a clear plan, a strategy. It needs to be somebody who's a bit of a bastard. It needs to be somebody who's tough. And it needs to be somebody, and I'll try and explain this as best I can, and if I'm not getting it across, please challenge me on it, and I'll do my best to quantify it. But there are times you need to take decisions that we as fans don't agree with, right? And you may need to brace yourself for some shit when that happens, but you still need to do it.
Yeah.
And if it's the right thing and it's proved in time that it's the right decision, then we'll see. It's almost like being a politician. Do you know what I mean? You have to go in and say, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And this is, and I'll be judged on that. And so you need somebody who's resilient, mentally tough, because there will be flack. It's too many Rangers supporters in the world for it not to be. There will be focus and flack. So you've got to be very, very mentally strong. You've got to be prepared to see your decisions, to back yourself, right? And make sure that if you make a decision, that you stick with it and you don't get, distracted by outside voices. Now, somebody who's like that, who's that strong, is not going to brook interference from up above.
Yes.
And I do wonder if that is an issue, because these guys are putting their money in, they're successful in their own fields. I wonder if sometimes, in fact, there's no wonder about it, they interfere in day-to-day stuff, and that has to stop. They have to take a step back and say, we're the board. Their job is to oversee what goes on at the football club. It is not to run the football club. That's not how
surely they can see, though, David. Surely they can see with their own two eyes, or however many board members it is that's getting involved. Surely they can see that in interacting all the time and getting involved with the day-to-day running of the football side of it, that they're making the club worse. They're pushing us further and further behind. Celtic, we're not winning leagues and cups like we should be. We're not even competing in Old Firm games like we should be. They've sacked Gio, they sacked Beale, they've brought in Clement. When did they turn around and go, maybe it's no the manager, maybe it's us?
At the end of the day, this is a results-based business. You know, and in any business, any job that I've worked in where there's targets, if you don't hit them, you don't last. Now, you know, when people say sack the board, right, I always say
it's impossible.
It's important, right? They would need to sack themselves, right? They're not going to do that. So let's be realistic. And we do, by the way, need the funding that they provide, right? Mm-hmm. So I want them to take a step back to say, do you know what, right? We've tried at this, but look where we are, right? Hasn't worked. And then hire people, good people, and they will be judged on that, by the way, and then let the people get on with the job. And don't interfere, and let them see through their plan. If he's the right person or she's the right person and you've hired them and you believe they're the right person, let them go and do the job. That's what happened with David Holmes, right? And times are different, but the idea remains the same. If you believe that someone has the vision and the strategy, because they're two different things, the vision and the strategy to take us where we need to go, hire them and let them do it. Don't let them do 80% of the job that you hired them to do. Let them do the whole job. And if they're not any good, sack them and bring someone else in, right? That's fine. Almost like you do with a manager, but don't interfere in the day-to-day running of the football club. We need somebody who is on the ball, in charge, knows what's going on all throughout the football club at every level. But it's almost like, the board wouldn't dream, genuinely, this is true, by the way, the board wouldn't dream of interfering with a manager's decision. Mm-hmm. But yet they'll do it with a chief exec, and there's a contradiction in there for me. So for me, it's a case of, if you're John Bennett, who's, let's be honest, had a horrendous 2 years as the chairman, and I'm sure he might point to some things and say, well, this happened before I was a chairman, or he'll point to things and say, we were unlucky with that, or didn't expect Bisgrove to leave, and all these things. It doesn't matter. Results-based business. Where are we right now as we sit here on the 11th of September? We are not in a good position. And therefore, you need to go, am I the person to get us out of this? Evidence so far, history suggests you're not. Hire someone, support them, give them all the tools you possibly can, and let them get on with the job. And I would suggest
how close do you think they are to doing that? And I'm just asking as a supporter, not for
close to a point, someone.
Yeah. Do you think they're any closer than what they were when Bennett came out and spoke?
No, I think they're further away. I mean, the stuff we're reading in the papers about Gillespie, if he was the choice, then clearly, for whatever reason, that isn't happening. So, I wouldn't expect someone imminently, no. I think it's going to take a wee while. They need to get it right. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt. This is the absolute last throw of the dice, I think, for Bennett in terms of credibility, because given everything that's going on the last couple of years, it's unlikely he's ever going to be beloved. Right? I think we could safely say that. There's too much is going on. But if he gets this right and we see an upturn, he will get the credit for it. We're a fair people, right? And if things begin to improve because of decisions that he makes, i.e. the hire and, letting the guy get on with it, we'll go, well done. I doubted you, but you got that right, and look, we're in a better place a year, 2 years down the line. If he gets it wrong, then, and each time they get something wrong, and each time we end up, in a position we don't want to be, it further damages that. This has been, I think, one of the problems that they haven't quite got their head around, is that when they come out and they say, we know things have went wrong, trust us, we're going to get it right. What basis is there for that trust? You're asking us based on nothing, based on no successes in the last few years. If you want to be generous, you start the malaise in summer 2021. That's 3 years now, right? That's not, a period that you can say it was bad luck. It's 3 years, a lot of decisions, and a lot has gone wrong. So, clearly this summer with the transfer business, they're trying to unpick the bad transfer business we've done in the last few years, trying to get the wage down, etc. I think one of the issues is that they'll go, look, we're trying to change, all this that happened, but it's almost like, but it was you guys who let that happen, right? These contracts were signed off by someone. So, the idea that it just sort of happened, that one day we turned around, there was a huge wage bill and the players weren't good enough, and I think that we need
little things, David, little things right? Like the Yanis Hadji situation, for example. The talk is that he's not getting played again because if he plays one more game, his wages bump up, right? I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to be the talk of the town, right? See if that is the case. That's just yet another example of the board's mistake. So now we can't play a player who could potentially help, maybe not, depends on your view of Yanis Hadji. But we're going to have to now play a Romanian international in the B team because the board have possibly said to the manager, if he plays, what is he in your plans? No, right, well, he's not playing. And that just feeds the narrative. But whether that's true or whether it's not, it's out there. So that narrative then feeds back to the supporters as well.
Yeah, 100%. Martin, look, we talk about death by a thousand cuts, don't we? That's a phrase that you hear a lot, right? And it's true because there's been a lot of things, just like the one you mentioned. Well, see, the biggest cut was a big, huge fucking axe-wound, gaping one in the back of our necks, and that was Ibrox this summer, right? And that is one that you really struggle to recover from, okay? Because this was not something that was foisted upon you. It was a decision that Rangers took that they were going to do for the right reasons, by the way, for the disabled section. But then you have to get it right. If you think that a football club that can't play in its own ground because of, not a pre-plan, if they'd said, by the way, we're taking this decision and it's going to be September before we get back in, so, live with it, that's one thing. But if you can't play in your own stadium, then what are fans supposed to think in terms of everything that's going on? And that's before, you look at the managers and the players and the contracts and all the rest of it. So that to me was the one that I think just tipped everyone, even, people who are broadly supportive, over the edge. That was the one that I thought was so big that when we were sitting at Hampden, as a support, it was horrendous. We're sitting there against Kiev and we're all going, this isn't right. And that is the one that I think just, for me, kind of, destroyed any sort of remaining belief. Now, I know, Dave King has come out this week and said John Bennett is working hard, and I don't doubt it. But being well-meaning and unsuccessful is not really any better than not caring and being unsuccessful, because it leads us to the same place. And I know that they care deeply. I don't doubt that. But I still think that we're in a position now where we need to go, what we have been trying hasn't worked. And in anything in life, if you're trying something and it doesn't work, try something else.